I am here in Winter Park. And I have to say that for anybody who's watching the video, because I am with son number one and son number three, three dogs husband, and I am back in the bedroom in Winter Park in our Airbnb doing our broadcast. So I'm a little relaxed and I'm excited for our talk. And Amy, are you anywhere exciting?
Nope, I am in my office, but you look so nice and cozy. I feel like I should go climb into my bed.
It's cozy. I have
Put
to
my
give
pillows
you,
behind me.
we just got done with the hike, and
I
yeah, I
love
feel
it.
like back in the day of kids and naps and mom gets a little time away. So
Yeah,
uh,
close the
ex-
door. Good for you.
close the door. So excited about our topic today. We are in episode 13. And it was fun today because I went back and was just doing a little updates on summaries and things on the YouTube channel. And it's like, wow, we've had some great conversations. We've had a lot of fun with this. So uh, number 13, here we are. And our title today is Just Do It. And everybody is familiar with that term, and we are not selling tennis shoes. We're discussing activism. And this came up really, and Amy, you could tell the story, but I had posted a story on LinkedIn and Amy commented on it. And from that interchange, we're like, this is a great topic. So, Amy, you go from here.
And very timely too. You had posted an article about social justice. I think it was a blog that you wrote.
Mm,
And one of the things that you said was, I want to be speaking up for positive change. And I was like, yes, that's exactly where I am now too. And so then I was like, let's talk about activism. And because we kind of get to this point in our lives where I'm just going to say we have time.
yes.
That's how I feel, at least. Like, um, and I'm going to use my mom as an example. You know, I just spent time with her, and she used to work full time. She had three kids, and she was a successful businesswoman. And when she retired, she became an activist, and she started. She's the one at the post office protesting whatever with her sign. She has a group of women. They sing protest songs that they make up. It's like kind of, she's having a really great time with it. And but it's all for positive change, and she's doing that. And I have found myself, so here's what happened and why
Mm,
this beyond my mother was. I went to a park last week, I believe, or the week before, and there was a young woman. I'm going to say she's in her 30s, and she wants to run for city council. And
okay.
so they were getting signatures to get her on the ballot. And so I
Okay.
went, okay. I went, I'm like, well, I'll sign her up. I looked at her platform. She wants to do a lot. She's pretty progressive about sustainability for our
Okay.
city and things like that. And I'm like, oh, that would be great. So I stopped. I was talking to her and I went to sign. And the signature right before mine was somebody from my neighborhood. And she was walking away. And I was like, oh, well, I should introduce myself. So I said, is that so and so? I asked Sarah this, the girl who wants to, or the young woman. I'm not going to say girl. She's got
It
four
feels like a
kids.
girl to us.
She's got four kids, and she's, but she's just younger than me. So anyway, I asked, I'm like, is that the name of the person there? And she said it is. And I said, oh, she's my neighbor. That's her address is right next to mine. And so we're new to the neighborhood. So I wanted to introduce myself. So we're talking. Then I continue talking to Sarah, who wants to get on the ballot. And then next thing I know, she's emailing me because she wanted to get in touch with my daughter, who's an urban planner in Kansas City, because we were
Right.
talking
Okay.
about that. And
Nice.
then she was like, listen, your neighbor is hosting a sign up party to get me on the ballot. Do you want to co-host it? And I was like, well, sure, I'll do that. So now I'm co-hosting. Who knows? I could be her campaign manager next week. So,
That's awesome, Amy.
so anyway, I'm like, I feel really engaged here, and it's kind of fun to support somebody who wants to do such great things for the city. And I don't have anything against the person that's in there, but at least I want to give her a chance to get on the ballot. And so
Right.
that's a piece of me being an
I
activist.
love it. Hey, Amy, tell me with your mom, were there things that she was really passionate about that she chose to jump in on? What what issues was your mom an activist about, and was the passion there and she waited until she had the time, or did she take the time later and find the things that gave her passion?
Good question. I am not really, I'm trying to think of the stuff that she's very active about, and um, I'm not really sure. She's really into women's rights. She's
Hmm.
really into, like, one of the things that she was educating me on was the ERA not being ratified because all the states hadn't. And I was like, what? I thought that was a done deal, but because so she's been very involved in that. And she's been very interested in a lot of issues throughout her life, but I think now she has time to dedicate to it. So that's what made her become an activist. Um, she's always had strong beliefs, and like she's the one who was like, you have to grow up and be able to support yourself. So she's always been a very strong role model and leader, but she didn't just have time to be involved because she was working all the time and traveling and
Right.
stuff like that. So I would say time is what gave her the opportunity. And I'm going to say that's the same for me. Like me being able to stop in the middle of the day at that park, it's because I had time to do it. Otherwise, I would have just said, oh, I don't have time to sign up for that.
And to listen and to hear what this young lady was all about and wanting to support her. And I like your point on that doesn't mean I'm not doing it because I dislike the person who's in office, but I want to support her. And part of activism doesn't always mean that you're trying to go against something, you're promoting something.
Exactly. It's speaking for positive change. And
Right.
she said something when we started talking about opportunity for streetcars in Omaha and opportunities for recycling and like all of these composting opportunities and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, this is exciting to get somebody who's fired up to do something different and at least just get her on the ballot. Let her have a
Right.
platform and have an opportunity. Yeah.
Right. I
So
just
next week I'm hosting a party for
I love it. We need pictures. We're going to post them to
okay,
this.
I'll
We'll
do a
post
picture.
them to our social media sites. I
Yeah.
looked up the definition of activism
Oh,
because
good.
I like to go back to the dictionary because sometimes we construe our own meanings on it. There's the definition is the definition, and what it's described at. Let's see, the policy of action or using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. And again, they don't use the word positive, but typically you're looking to make a change, a positive political or social change. Back to the post that I had written about was social justice, and in my upon further reflection is my word I use now about I look back to these different decades, and yeah, some things that might have looked on the outside as great, I look a little deeper and challenge myself in what I could have done differently or more. And you know I would tell you, Amy, I love you bringing up activism because I feel like I've been really good on sitting on boards, doing things on a much broader scale for social change. And when it became political, I would close my mouth. It's enough social change that I could stand the line. And one question I would have for you as I was thinking about this subject, and it was the person I think about for activism is my ex-husband's grandmother, Grandma Kashka. She was always the one, on the women's voters, on the ERA. She was always big on different platforms and spoke her mind in a very eloquent way. But generationally, I think of the silent generation, which is, I guess your mom would probably fall in that too, but she was not silent. But there's a lot of people that were more silent. Then I think about and maybe your mom wouldn't be in that generation. Then you have she'd probably be on the cusp of that. Then you have the generation Vietnam. We all know the protests. We can see them, and I compare them to today. And then I kind of feel like those years where we grew up, we weren't the silent generation, but maybe we were the content generation.
Right. Right. It didn't seem like there was a lot to get fired up about.
Right.
At least not in my world. It was just like, yeah, I agree. More content.
Right.
And then I would say maybe now with some hindsight and maturity, it's like, all right, we can do something different now. Like there's some opportunity. I think the generation right now with the stuff that's going on, they're opening the doors for us to like become activists again. So it's like, okay, maybe we don't need to be content. We can do some things different.
Yeah.
I,
If we
I'm
want
going to tell
change, you got to
you,
do something.
I know exactly. I was laughing. I'm going to mention my brother because him and his wife, they picked me up from the airport when I was visiting my mom, and I was putting my bag in their trunk, and they're very engaged and activist in Las Vegas. And I so admire that. Now I'm going to say they're a few years younger than me, and they don't have children. So they've been able to get engaged with the community really quick. And they have time. That's why I said they don't have children, because they have time. Because I
Right.
will leave my kids where my time suck.
Right.
But they had protest signs in the back of their car. And I was like, what are the protest signs for? And they're like, oh, just in case we come up to a corner and there's a protest and we want to join up.
No
I
way.
was laughing. I was like, well, that's good for you. So have you ever done a protest?
I haven't, and I thought about this a lot, Amy, thinking, have I done a protest? How have I, back to actively pushing for social change? Have I really put myself out there? I don't think I've ever held a sign. I
Yeah.
have supported, um, and I'm just going to say, right, I completely support peaceful protests. I think it
Yeah.
is a freedom, and I'm not even saying what it's for,
Yeah.
but
I
I
agree.
completely. And there's a difference between a riot and a peaceful protest, and I think people really, really need to stop blurring the lines of the two. And if you want your voices heard, you figure out a way to do it, and I'm all for it. But have I actually held the sign? Back to what we call this just do it. Did I just do it, or did I just watch it and say good job? You know?
I I did this second. I did the latter. I'm just gonna admit. I have watched it and I've said good job. And that's exactly what happened when I saw the signs in my brother's trunk. I'm like, nice, good job. But I've never held this sign up and done a protest.
And protests aren't the only way to do it. Back to activism, it's pushing for it's the city council running for office. How often do people actually take the time to run for office? And in this day and age, who would want to? That's a huge leap of faith, because it's become such an embattled thing to be a part of, and you're really putting yourself out there to be persecuted. And
Right.
I made the comment, they had a big drive about trying to get women to run for office. And I do think typically women have a little bit thinner skin too, and busier with other things. Maybe women want to deal with politics less than men too. But I've had people say to me, "You should run for office." It happened in Omaha. It happened, you should run for city council, or you should get more involved in Durango. And I'm like, why would I do that to myself, or even the people close to me? It just,
Right.
and so really, I'm being against myself. Back to activism. Am I just too much of a wimp to do that? Part of me says I like this topic because I'm challenging myself to find, maybe it's not running for office, maybe it's not holding a sign, even though now maybe I'm going to think twice. If I feel strongly about something, I should hold the sign and do it, and just do it and take the step. But what can I do, rather than lip service and having conversations with my husband, or a few conversations in private on issues, to really push for positive change? I always told my kids when they were little, or not little, but when they would complain. Okay, they would complain that usually it would be around a rule they didn't like at school. they're being too strict for this. I don't like this rule. And I would always say, you got three choices. Okay.
Right.
Okay. You can just break the rule and get in trouble for it. You can leave the school, go somewhere else that has different rules. Okay. If you don't like the rules, go somewhere else. Or you can challenge the rule. You can go to the school board. You can go or you can run for student council. You can do something about it. Okay. But you talking to me isn't you have three choices, and complaining to me isn't one of them. So
Right. 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 I always put it back to him, and I love your three choices, but I always said, wow, bummer. What are you going to do? And then
right.
it was like, you figure it out. If you've got a problem with it, then, figure it out. Speak up, say something.
And sometimes, and I think this is one thing I'd love to hear your opinion on, is there's things I feel really strongly about, but then I struggle with what do I do for positive change? Because you could argue, does holding the sign, it creates awareness, but is that really pushing the positive change? And
Right.
an example I'll give to you is my friend Lori and I our sons were both at school. They were at a Catholic school, and it was a rule. Okay. So again, as a rule, they had a rule that the teachers had to follow. They signed a contract that said, here's my moral something. And one of the things they couldn't be was gay. And it was kind of a don't ask, don't tell. And as long as you never said you were gay, you were fine. Well, there was a man that was a very good teacher at the school that got married and was very public about it. And because of that, he went against his contract and he was fired. And my friend and I were just beyond ourselves. And we sat at my kitchen table and we were upset.
I'm just going to say he transferred to my kid's school.
You
He
guys are
was
very
a
lucky.
wonderful teacher.
Very
Yes.
lucky. And
Yeah.
and Lori and I were pissed. And we did do like we had the polls, we signed the change, makechange.org. We did all that. And here's what I remember. We sat at the kitchen table and we looked at each other and we're like, so what are we going to do about it? And we're like, are we going to pull our kids out of the school? Are we going to put them in
Right.
another school? And I could say it wasn't in the best interest of the kids, but I don't think we had the courage to do that. And we weren't willing to do that. And we honestly looked at each other and said, we're not proud of ourselves, but we're not pulling our kids. And what more can we do? And we
Right.
pretty much left it at that. And I don't feel good about that, because I didn't feel good about the whole thing, but it was a path of least resistance.
Right.
And our kids didn't want to, maybe we could have asked the kids, because they felt strongly about it. Do you feel strongly about it enough that you want to switch schools? But we just let it go. And what was the right answer?
I don't,
What should we have done that was more?
that's such a hard situation because it's not just you. Like, it would be different if it was you choosing not to eat lunch somewhere. But this would have been pulling your kids, disrupting their social life, their friends, their studies. And so that's a much bigger decision than just choosing a restaurant and where you're going to eat. You know what I mean? So um I wish I could say, oh, I would have pulled my kids, but I don't know if I would have. I would have struggled to it because there's also that sense of community. And if you could lose your community.
And
It
in reflection now, Amy, here's what I'm thinking. The reality was the best thing we could have done is vocally supported him, because he was the one who was the activist, because he put his job on the line to do what he believed was right. And that was not to hide his marriage and to hide his personal life and not let that get in the way. And he knew he was going to get fired from it. And he did something to create a dialogue to say, for people and parents to say, why is this in the contract? Why are we limiting our pool of great teachers? If I was somebody coming into school, I would second guess and say, wow, if they're limiting their pool by that much with these rules,
yeah.
how are they getting the best teachers? And so maybe,
So after all that unfolded, did anything change?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't
I don't-
remember. Nobody was vocal about it after that.
Yeah. Because
Who
I do
knows?
remember that was kind of a big, I remember the students rallying behind him because he was very well loved. And
Great teacher.
yes, completely agree.
So when you just do it, how do you define what the do it is? Or do you ask yourself the question on, I feel strongly about this. What pushes, what action can I do that pushes for the positive change? Is that the question we should ask ourselves?
Right. But also give I think you have to give yourself some leeway and know that every solution isn't gonna be like the like you can't do everything, and you can't pull your kids from every school every time you have an issue. You can't, but there are small things you can do. You can take small steps. You can vocalize support for people who are doing stuff, and it might be out of your comfort zone, but if they're doing it, then support them. Maybe bring them lunch if they're picketing, or bring bottles of water, or um, there's small things we can do to help people.
Right.
And
Right.
also being respectful and letting people um, letting people protest, letting people appeal, letting people be activists, and respect that's their First Amendment right to be out there with free speech and all that.
Right.
I learned that this week, all the things on First Amendment, the 5 things.
I need to go back and read it, or you need to share it with me because I need to get schooled a little bit.
Well, I don't know if I could. It's like freedom of speech, freedom of press, um, right to protest, and I can't remember all of it.
I do think, sorry, I'm moving my computer around here. I
That's okay.
do think sometimes with activism, back to you don't necessarily have to have the protest sign. I was reflecting back and it's like, I think I've been a pretty good activist. I think that if I feel like if I feel something is wrong, I innately, know I have to do something about it.
Yeah.
At times in my life was I more vocal than others. I remember as a child being the person that we had. This is my first activism story would be they had only boys baseball in my little town in Iowa. And there was a girl named Kim who was a couple of years old, maybe she was a year older than me, 2 years older than me, that was a very good athlete, and the boys coach recruited her to play baseball with the boys. Well, me and the girls were like, we don't get a sport, and she gets to play boys baseball. And now I don't know if I don't remember who was the person who came up with the idea, but we all showed up at City Hall when it was sign up for baseball the next year, and all the girls signed up for baseball. And
Nice.
that lasted 1 year because we were throwing balls everywhere. They had to put us on teams. They had to get more coaches. And by the next year, we had girls softball.
Nice.
So we didn't protest, but we pushed for. It's like, you know what? She
You
gets to
know
be on
what?
it, and none
That's
of us
great.
were any as good as Kim. Like I remember throwing the ball and hitting my coach's girlfriend, and by mistake. It was not. It was the bad news bears. But
Right, right. Well, and I think activism, like, I love that story because you started young and you wanted something positive to happen, and you went out there with a group of people, which there's a lot of comfort in a group of people, and you made some change happen. Um, but the small things you can do is maybe just being more informed and more um, engaged in the information, and you could just be an activist in your family to create critical thinkers. So you have just your family engaged in what's going on in the world, and so that you're at least planting the seeds for them to become more active and creating positive change for people.
and maybe it's listening to their stories too of the activists that are out there, because I
Yeah.
do think we, what is the term, our world right now is full of data and stories, but
Hmm.
we're lacking in intelligence in the information. So, like, people can talk about an issue, and I don't know if you've ever done this before. One I'll put out there is the Affordable Care Act. Oh, the Affordable Care Act. And remember, my background's healthcare. I can
Yeah, yeah.
read you the Affordable Care Act. the pros and cons, and it's very, but it's horrible, blah, 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 get rid of it. And I'll say, well, tell me, what is the Affordable Care Act? They have no idea, not one idea, Amy. And they'll go on and on and on about how they're against it. And I'll say, what is it about? Well, it takes all of our money. Well, how do you
Yeah.
pay for it? And honestly, I tell you, 90% of the people cannot tell me what it is, but they complain about it as their number one priority of to get rid of it. And that would be an example. So one thing that I've been thinking about, since you brought up this subject, is different subjects that I want to learn more about, going to the activists and their platforms and reading and following, Greta, what's her last name, on climate
Oh,
control, the
yeah.
young girl.
Yeah.
She's been interesting to follow. I've been learning a lot, not just from her, but from her posts, because she'll post from the scientists, and I've learned from her because I feel like it's something I need. I didn't know anything about or enough about, and I'm trying to be informed. So
For you. That's great.
activism is learning from those people that have taken the time and are more than the sign too.
Right.
Understand.
I completely agree. So talking about learning and reading and getting information, have you watched The Social Dilemma?
I've had so many people tell me to watch it. I've not watched it. So tell
Okay.
me. I
So
want to hear. I'm going to watch
I
it.
do want you to watch it sometime, because we had this discussion where part of The Social Dilemma is they talk about social media. And if you're, let's say you're following Greta on Twitter and you're liking her post, so then
Okay.
you're going to start seeing more posts related to climate change. You're going to start seeing more environmental. And, next time you Google something that has to do with climate, it's going to be geared towards what Greta's
That is thinking.
It's not going to be because it's all these the analytics, or not the analytics, but where they're getting all the information, and they're feeding you all the same information because they know you
Artificial
click on it.
intelligence.
Yes, it's the
Okay.
artificial intelligence, and they're getting you to click on it. So they'll keep giving you more of the same stuff because they know you're going to click on it. And what's happening is, so you've researched Greta, and now you're kind of going down this path of researching climate change. But there's another person who's decided to follow somebody who's the opposite. So say someone in your family thinks it's a hoax, climate change is a hoax, and they're following people who are propagating that information. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only information they're getting, and you're only getting this information. So the two of you, when you come together, have a discussion, you have no common facts.
We have completely different data sets. Yes. So how does, Amy, okay, so I want to hear more about this, but when you got done with Social Dilemma, what was your answer to how, if you and I we want the right data. We don't want to read fake news. We want to be informed. Where does one, other than Wikipedia, where does one get
So this is the solution I came up to, because I came to the conclusion to read the local newspaper, because the local newspaper isn't feeding me what I want to hear. I'm reading the exact same thing that the person who thinks climate change is a hoax is reading. So we have the same information. And so that's that's helped me moderate. It's more.
So Amy, tell me this. Okay, I'm gonna be devil's advocate a little bit. So you had mentioned, I think before or after, we were talking about COVID, and you had told me, I think it was that hospitalization rates in Omaha were up to 93% at the time, or 95, something like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'd heard nothing about this. Back to the news that's fed. So I looked at CDC, and they 100%, it was factual. 93% I think was the number at the time, but the ventilators weren't an issue, but they were not bringing in any patients, and it was a big deal, right? I went to omaha.com and I couldn't find a story on it, and the top news story was which quarterback was going to start for Nebraska. I'm like, there's your answer, follow the dollar. Because the last thing they want to talk about is COVID, okay?
Right.
Because that would impact, think about it, those are two those two stories don't go well together. But that's the local. I went to the local news to hear what was going on in Omaha, and there was nothing that I could find about COVID.
Interesting. So I read the actual newspaper.
Okay,
So sports would be on the sports page and whatever, but I'm
is on
sure on
yours.
omaha.com, they're putting whatever they think the people are most interested in. And so that probably omaha.com might be using artificial intelligence to feed
To
you
track what I want,
articles that you would be more
you're
interested in.
interested in.
Maybe, I don't know. It's my guess. But the actual newspaper, you know,
Right. That's a good point. And I bet I do go to Huskers quite a bit because I have a friend whose son plays for the Huskers, and they'll post stories and I go to that, right? I'll
oh, yeah.
read his
Yeah, yeah.
stories.
So there you
And
go.
so
It's tracking
they
you.
probably think that's probably why, oh, Amy, I got played, didn't I?
Well, watch Social Dilemma because it's a
Okay.
very interesting because we're all being played. That's the whole point. And so you and it's a group of 20-year-olds who are feeding this like programming this artificial intelligence. So we're being all played by these, you know, we're
Wha-
just being played.
One thing one reflection I have that I'm thinking about back to the point on just do it, and you and I were having, I wrote the words down because we were having this conversation last week about, what does it mean, when do you step up, stand up, step up, we talked about that. Stand up, step up, don't worry about what people think. And part of me says I need to be intentional. We use that word a lot, but part of me says I need to be intentional and think about what issues am I most passionate about, whether it be
Right,
political or social, because and I tell you, that's not reading articles. The things I'm most passionate about, I have the most experience in, right? I mean,
right,
I've hands on, it's not people telling me, it's because I have been in the trenches. But would it be a good exercise to say, here are the things I'm most passionate about, and pick the top two and be very intentional about saying, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do? How can I create positive change for this, rather than being all over the board or getting sucked into big political conversations about what sign is in your lawn, rather than the person, being more intentional about an issue and the passion behind that issue and doing something about it. And
yeah,
what is the best vehicle for me to do something where my voice can be heard in a positive way and create positive change? So
right.
that's kind of my takeaway. You're already doing it. You're doing something,
Well,
but I need to
I'm
do
doing
something.
little things. But what you said is so spot on. Like, where are your passions? Where are your channels of influence too? So you have your family, you could have your work, you could have volunteer activities that you're already aligned with that you can do stuff. I'm just thinking, I'm working on a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative with
Mhm.
our association, and not something that I probably would have signed up for, but I'm partnered with somebody. Not that I don't believe in it or anything. I think it's super important, but it just wasn't in my knowledge base. Like, it wasn't in my comfort zone of, oh, I know what we can do with this. And I'm working with somebody who is so in tuned and educating me and sending me articles, and I'm reading books. And now I am like fired up. And I'm like, boy,
Nice.
the stuff that the change we can bring about in our association to make it more have more representation, make people feel like they belong, that it's all, we can do so much better than what we're doing right now.
Right.
And so, but that's my channel of influence, and that's what I found was, ooh, I can
Love
influence
it.
where we go with this because I just opened myself up to learn and build that passion around it. It's not something I would have said I was passionate about. I would have been more fearful, but today I'm pretty darn passionate about it.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So, you pick
In
your
a,
path.
in a space where you already have an impact and you can take it to the next level.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have a
it's
voice and now you can make an impact with that voice.
right. Yeah. All right. So we have a few questions. Um, One is I recently watched Social Dilemma. How do I know if what I'm reading and seeing is false, biased, or sensationalized? Okay, so we already talked about this. I'm sorry that we brought this up before.
No, but back to, do we trust? Okay, you tell me this. You know how now in social media, like purportedly, if there's a link, it would tell you if it's a trusted. Can we trust those that are telling us whether it's a trusted source?
Oh, yeah. So that's a
Right?
whole different, yeah, I don't, that's a good question. I don't know how they're doing that. I will say there are graphs out there that show, biased, unbiased, and if they're leaning, right leaning, what I can't remember there's four quadrants, and there are some that are right there in the middle, and like BBC is in there. I think most of the network, like ABC is in there. I can't remember, but those the ones that are people are getting their basic news from. But I
Right.
will say this, those are also sensationalized. Like they can, be standing in the water talking about the storm, and behind them, or the other way, it's completely clear and the sun is shining. So because they're trying to engage viewers. So you have to just kind of have that filter on. So those are my thoughts.
I don't know what to believe. I don't even know how to answer this, Amy. I need to watch the show. And I keep trying to go back to, um, before we had social media. I mean, I remember my grandfather being like super passionate about eh, politics and about his different feelings and conspiracy theories. And so it's not new, and that was in the day when I'm talking pre-cable, so they read the newspaper. A lot of it was talk, right? um so I'm trying to compare and trying to think, where do you go back to? Do you totally stay away from social media? I don't know, it's a tough one. Because I just got done reading the book 1984, Orson
Oh,
Welles, and
yeah.
it was all this stuff,
Yeah,
Big
yeah,
Brother feeding to you what to believe and what to know. And he wrote that book when? What was the year he wrote that book? 19,
yeah.
hold on,
I want to say maybe the 60s,
might even be four. Okay, I'm gonna look it
maybe
up because it
before
should
that.
drive me crazy. But back to, you look at it, it was basically artificial intelligence is what he was talking about, right?
Right.
And I think about that now, it's like, okay, and people had said read it because it's so um and it's so what we are living today. Let's see what it
Right.
says.
And I always say, like, the articles that are way out there, if I see something on social media, I'm like, all right, so that's too crazy to believe. I just don't believe it. I'm like, it's not good. And I've also stopped following people who share silly stuff, because I'm like, all
Right.
right, if you're not going to share dogs and cats being cute, then if you're going to, send me false articles, I'm going to stop following you.
And
So,
Amy, I'm bad. I take pictures of them on my phone and show my husband, and I'm like, how can it? What was the latest one?
yeah,
That people in the nursing home, they were signing over the entire nursing home ballot, and to
right,
blah blah blah, and I'm just like for the entire state of Nevada, and I'm like, you're killing me, Biggs.
right,
This.
right,
I
right.
think, you know what I think? I think everybody should have a social media accountability partner that is a different stance as them politically, or maybe even a little different temperament, to look at everything that they put out there just as a second set of eyes. Because I think there's a lot of impulsiveness in sharing, and you get something going and you share things. Boy, wouldn't it be a better world if we had that? Just a
Right.
little bit of a audit or a reviewer before you push send.
I love that. I think that's a great idea. and just making sure you're going from trusted sources and not
right.
the wonky, the onion or something like that. Because
I
sometimes those
can't,
are almost believable.
what was the guy's name that Alex something, and he was a conspiracy, and he was horrible because he preyed on Sandy Hook
Oh,
and
yes.
said they really didn't die, and people believe this stuff. And I think he ended up getting convicted. I listened to a podcast about him, but that's just evil. I mean,
Right,
that is he's preying on a population that are victimizing other people, you know?
right. Oh, and the other thing, speaking of that, is the stuff you get in the mail. Because I have seen that working with people, and you get these conspiracy type letters, and then but at the end of the letter they ask for money. And so it's like if they're asking for money, they're pushing something that you shouldn't have to pay for the basic news.
Okay, so Amy, I'm going to tie back to one of our past podcasts, which is She's So Vain. One of the main reasons I will never run for office is because the opposing party would take the worst picture of me and they would find it and they would plaster with the grainiest, worst
Right.
filter with snot coming out of my nose and wrinkles. And they would put it on every flyer and send it everywhere. And I'm sorry, I don't know. Maybe I take things too personally. I don't know if I could take the personal attacks because they always go after the women for her looks.
Right, right,
Always.
right, right.
And they wouldn't have to look too hard to find some really bad crap on me to
Oh
where I
my
look
gosh,
like
I have
hell.
some really bad pictures. One of that happened locally though, here in Omaha. One of the politicians, she was interviewed somewhere, and she said, and she showed the whole interview, but part of it, she said, yes, they're saying I'm a radical socialist. And so the opponent has an ad of that says, Kara says, I'm a radical socialist. And it's her saying she's a radical socialist, but the whole content, the origination was they say this is who I am. And then they clipped it and put it in their ad of her saying that. It's just naughty. I'm like, that's just not
Well,
nice.
it kind of gets back to one of the points we made on activism. So now we're doing full circle here is don't worry about what people think about you. But it's hard when you get
Right,
attacked. It's hard.
right, right. Right. And so back to activism, I think it's doing the small stuff. We just have to keep doing the small stuff.
And
Speaking
it
of
can
that,
lead to the big stuff.
yes, I am working the polls. That's one of the things I signed up to do. I have never signed up to work the polls. And I saw something that they needed poll workers. And I'm like, well,
Mhm.
I have flexibility with my schedule. I can pencil that day off. And so I'm working the polls on November 3rd.
So we're at.
I haven't gotten my assignment yet.
Okay. Okay. Good
But
for you.
here's something I'm gonna say about this is I had to do the training. And because I had to do the training, I now understand all the checks. Not, I don't understand all of them. I shouldn't say that, but I see some of the checks that are in place to make sure people are only putting in one ballot. And like, there's like many checks, they know who they mailed ballots to. And if you get a mailed ballot, you have to mail it in. You can't come to the poll and vote. And so there's lots of checks in place. And I was even able to check my ballot and it got delivered already. It's already received and all accepted. So it's kind of a cool system. It's kind of fun to go through the training and learn about it.
Nice. I love it. And
Yeah,
it's so needed right now. And I think back to understanding the system, you could follow the news that says, oh, you can't trust this and you can't trust that, and
right.
they're stealing this. I mean, they're already saying it's not, it's the whole thing's a farce. I'm like, how can we say it's a farce already? We've had elections for how long have we had elections? 1780?
Right.
I don't know, would it be
Yeah.
right after 1776? But we've had elections and we've had mail-in from the beginning of time. And how can we already say it's unjust other than
Right.
conspiracy theories? And
Right.
I
And
love
if
it
you
that you're
find yourself
volunteering.
Yeah. And if you find yourself saying something is unjust, then get in there and get better informed. Go to the source, sign up to be a poll worker, and or whatever it is. that, you know, if you're saying that social justice isn't an issue, you know, saying that, you know, maybe whatever, you know, then get in and get involved and see what you really see what really is going on instead of making assumptions off of what people are telling you.
Right. And then do something about it. Just do it.
Just do it. I love
Just
it.
do it.
Okay, so if we go to final discussion question,
Okay.
what's the real in this situation? We're doing really good on time today.
Look at it. Take 13 episodes, Amy, and
I
we are
know,
getting
13.
this
Well, we've
down.
been trying to dwindle our conversations tighter. And so, anybody out walking and hoping for an hour walk, I know you're going to get a little
And
shorter
hey,
time.
and just to feed, Amy's a very organized one, and she's really good at keeping us on time, and we look at our little time. I like all the little artsy stuff. And so come on, somebody tell me that you like the pictures that we put on the
I know.
pick me and pick monkey. I have a lot of fun with that. So
You are having a good time. You're doing a good job with that stuff. Okay, so our final discussion question,
okay,
what's the
back
real
on
in these
track.
situations and what's the ideal?
That's a tough one now, isn't it? I guess the real is that everybody has the opportunity to be an activist, right? If you can talk, and I guess Helen Keller couldn't talk or hear, and she was still an activist, wasn't she? Um, Maybe
Well,
the real is we all have the opportunity, right?
yeah, and you even think of John Lewis. Like
Yeah.
he was when he started as an activist, he was um you know, not welcome in a lot of places that he was sitting at the Woolworth counter to eat. He, you know, he became an activist just by sitting there and
Here's
putting.
one you can look. I'm just going to throw her out there. Look up Jane Jacobs. She's my idol. She was an activist on housing, and she called out her theories on why public housing did the projects didn't work. She nailed it. Anyway, I'm going to stop at that. Look her up. I
I
saw her
will.
documentary. I'm going to read her book next.
What was her name? Jane Rogers?
Jane Jacobs,
Jane Jacobs.
ahead of her time.
Okay, I wrote it down. I always walk away with notes after talking to you. Okay, so the real in this situation is anybody can be an activist. That's the real. What's the ideal?
Acting on it,
Doing it, just doing it,
doing it.
just stepping up and realizing we can do the small stuff. We don't have to do the big stuff. We can
Right.
just be the activists in our families. We can be, you know, I was sitting on the patio with friends the other night and we started talking politics, which I know is very dangerous when we were having wine on the patio and started talking politics, but that's kind of what's happening right now. And I have a very dear friend. He's the nicest person in the world, and he told me something that we disagree on, and then we started talking about it and we were laughing, and I'm like, you know, I think you're swayable. Let's keep talking about this. And he was laughing, I was laughing, um but having those conversations and just being authentic, it's
Right.
fun, it's enjoyable, and not being angry and mean about it, and just
Right.
doing it.
We can all play together. Activism, back to, I guess the thing I would reinforce is where I think there's a lot of confusion today, back to peaceful protest versus riot.
Yeah.
What did I see the stat was? 92% of protests that have happened in America since would have been March or August, April of this year have been peaceful. But all the focus is on the ones that were violent. And because it is a protest does not make it violent, just like because is activism does not make it negative, does
Right.
not make it, in your face. It's all about positivity. Doesn't mean that there's some bad things. People can take it for self-interest. Back to motive, you got to assume good intent, but sometimes
Yeah.
there is bad intent, because that's what happens when you're giving a pedestal sometimes.
Yeah.
um, but assume good intent and do it.
And going back to what you said about your social justice article, speaking for positive change. If it's moving us in the right direction, then let's lift people up, let's support them, and let's go for that positive change.
Hmm. Love it.
Yeah. All right. Oh my gosh, such an ideal world we could live in.
Such an ideal world. We're going to work on it,
I
Amy.
know.
Every day's a new day.
Yeah. All right. What's
Tell
our
us,
wrap question?
oh, it is our wrap question. Okay, our wrap question is, what was your last favorite purchase?
Okay, I've got one.
Okay, what is it?
Good question. Well, fall has arrived. And so when fall arrives, I tend to like to buy candles. And
Yeah.
so I got a pumpkin popcorn candle. And I'm just going to tell you, it is the most lovely thing I've ever smelled because it's like
Really?
a butter popcorn with pumpkin bars being baked. It's
Does it make you
amazing.
hungry?
No, it doesn't, but
Okay.
but it just smells so good. Oh my gosh. It reminds me of, have you ever eaten the Jelly Bellies, the butter popcorn Jelly Bellies?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, those are my
Yum.
favorites. So anyway, okay.
And I love a great candle. And my sister-in-law has a retail shop down in Texas, and they do
Uh,
live sales. And she always has candles. And she has a maker that does these mason jar candles. With a couple of them have been like cut herb, and like you would think. And whenever she says you're going to be surprised, this one's really a good one. I don't know where they come up with these combinations, but there's something. And I
Nice.
like smell is a big thing. I'm with you. I love a good candle.
Yeah,
So it's a good
yeah.
thing. Okay, my favorite purchase, my latest favorite purchase was a yellow, almost canary yellow puffer coat. And Garrett,
Oh,
it was the
that's putting it out there.
the I had I love Johnny Bowden's out of the UK. Some of my favorite dresses are from there from way back when. Anyway, you know how it happens. You have your birthday and they give you your free $15 or $20. And then you get an email saying you got another 20% off. And this coat had my eye, and here's why. There's a blog story on this from way back when. My mother back in the day bought me a bright yellow coat on the sale rack, and this was my mom who made most of my clothes. My mom was edgy. We had a yellow door. My mom was edgy,
Ah,
but it's not always fun in grade school to be edgy
right.
because sometimes you can pull it off and sometimes you can't. So I had, and it was a parka type thing. Like it went down to my knees. And there was a boy a year older than me that every time I walked to lunch, because we had to walk all the way to lunch in the snow, because you had to go from grade school to high school, he called me Big Bird. And he called me Big Bird,
It's,
and
that's
I
so
wore that
mean.
damn, it was mean, but kids can be mean. And
Yeah.
I wore that damn coat because I was not going to hurt my mother's feelings by
Oh,
not wearing the coat. And I just decided yellow's my color, baby. And I've had more yellow things like canary yellow, and I'm like, Big Bird, it's me.
I
It's you,
love
boy.
it.
You call me that all day long. And so I'm like, okay, guess what? I'm 53. It's time for me to have my Big Bird coat again.
Nice. I love it. And boy, grade school, that is a tough time to have a coat like that because you just want to fit in. And,
But
and
but now
but
when
it's
I think
great to
about it,
stand out.
I think about my mom because she was edgy, and I'm like, who buys the yellow coat? I'm all for it. Johnny Bowden's selling this yellow coat. It's a beautiful thing. So
I
I am
love
very
it.
happy with my yellow coat.
Kudos. You'll have to do a picture in your yellow coat.
And the other tip there is if you wear it skiing, if you have an unusually colored coat, you're much easier to find on the ski slopes. That's a
Yes,
trick too.
that's exactly what I was thinking of when you were saying that, because
Yeah,
I always dress my kids in bright colors on the ski
to
slopes so I
find
can
them.
find them.
Uh-huh.
No
Totally.
white, no black. I want bright colors.
Yep.
And I did the crazy hats too, so
Hats
that I
too.
could
Yep.
find them. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, good. This was a great conversation.
Lots to think about, and I'm going to start reading my Jane Jacobs book because I got to tell you, one issue I'm really that passionate about is affordable housing, because
Yeah.
it's an issue in our country and in our cities. And I'm blessed that I've never really had to worry about that, but it's tough. And I've done a lot of research on it, and I don't have all the answers,
Yeah.
but we need to find some. So I'm empowered
I,
to work on that one.
I'm gonna say one of them that has piqued my interest is the cash bond system. And just because
Hmm.
my brother is very involved in that, and I'm just starting to learn about it, but there's people who are in jail because they can't afford $100 bond. And so they're in jail for, 30, 60 days just because they don't have the $100. And they could be in jail because they didn't pay a $45 ticket, bonds $100,
Oh,
and they're in jail and they
you need
can't
to
work.
school me on that one. I want to hear about that.
I know. Well, my brother was educating me on it because he's very involved in it. And it's just like, wow, the cash bond system was built for people who have money.
A lot of things were built for people who had money. The
Yeah,
system on three strikes you're out, and people can be in jail for 40 years for a couple of marijuana charges. And
right.
uh, yeah, I don't know if I can fix that one. I know it's wrong, and I'm going to push my politicians to fix our criminal system that way because that was a bad law.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm
okay.
inspired. Thank
All
you.
right. Have a great weekend, and I will get back to the
You
dogs and the
too.
kids.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, Amy.
Bye.
Until next week, everyone.